to Jonathan Taylor. Huge hole. He's at the 30. He's going to go. 10, 5, touchdown. Jonathan Taylor made a man miss the line of scrimmage and then runs it into Pater for a one-handed INT. Are you kidding me? Kenny Moore.
What a play by Nyheim Hines.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Bring the Juice Colts podcast. I'm here, Derek Larger, and Cody's joining me as well. And today, guys, wanted to talk to you about some other free agent news that was going around here today. So apparently the Colts released that they will be meeting Sammy Watkins on Wednesday. Watkins is meeting a few other teams here in the next few days as well. When this video goes up, I think he's going to be having a meeting with Baltimore on Tuesday, and I believe is having a meeting with either Tampa Bay or somebody else on Thursday. So some other free agent news here, Cody, and, you know, it's not the T.Y. Hilton news that everybody's been wanting to hear, but, you know, you got another guy here that, you know, could potentially come in here and provide some minutes. But, I mean, overall, what's your opinions on the Colts potentially having a meeting with Sammy Watkins?
Yeah, it's very interesting for me with Sammy Watkins. I mean, he's like 28 years old, has been with the Chiefs the last couple of years. And, you know, I've always thought Sammy Watkins was a very talented player that never fully had lived up to his potential. You know what I mean? He was a former first-round pick. He 27 years old, to be 28 here in June. You know, was a former first-round pick in 2014, if you remember, from the Buffalo Bills. Mm-hmm. And has always kind of played, at least with Kansas City, he's always played kind of second fiddle to Tyreek Hill. And so has had a little bit of different history as well the last couple of years. Hasn't played in 16 games, has missed some games due to injury. This past year played in 10 games. So certainly think that he's a very talented receiver. I will say that for sure. He's still young, so I kind of like that. He's 6'1", about 210 pounds. So overall, I think this is a very intriguing name for sure with Sammy Watkins. But, you know, I do think, and we'll kind of get into this, I do think that if they did sign a Sammy Watkins, for example, and obviously he's talented. I mean, you just said he's meeting with a couple different teams. I still feel like the Colts shouldn't just say they're good with Sammy Watkins. You know what I mean? Like either they should look at to sign T.Y. Hilton, or maybe they should look in the draft somewhere else, maybe decently early or maybe mid-round. But, you know, going back to your original question, I'm very intrigued by this name. I know that was the guy that was on your kind of list that you guys did about some kind of tier 2 receivers that, you know, we talked about a bunch of guys that we knew right off the bat, and then Sammy Watkins was in that second video. So, yeah, I'm very intrigued by Sammy Watkins, like I said.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of different options that the Colts can go with this wide receiver route. I mean, we know that there are we do know right now that there are 3 guys on the roster that we know are going to get the minutes. It's Zach Pascal, there's Paris Campbell, and then you got some other guys that come in here. And, you know, I mean, it's ultimately, do we re-sign T.Y. Hilton? Do we, you know, get a guy like a Sammy Watkins? Now, the big question that I think a lot of people have addressed, and, you know, Cody, it was a point that you have brought up to me several times the last offseason when we were kind of breaking down the roster for right before, you know, the season started. And we were kind of making predictions on who our 4th, 5th, 6th receivers were going to be, right? And, you know, we're in that situation now where, you know, if Watkins comes in and we still get T.Y. Hilton, you know, you're going to have 4 wide receivers that you know of, but, you know, what role would Sammy Watkins play, right? You know, you mentioned several times how a lot of these 5th and 6th wide receivers for Indianapolis, a lot of them play special teams. Now, Sammy Watkins, to my knowledge, has never played special teams, and I don't believe that Sammy Watkins is one of those. So it begs the question of, is does Sammy Watkins even fit with this team right now?
I think that's a fair point to bring up. You also didn't even mention Michael Pittman, who a lot of people think could be the number one receiver this next year. So, you think those guys that you said if you re-sign T.Y. Hilton, he'll probably be your number one receiver going into this year. Pittman, then you mentioned Zach Pascal, Paris Campbell. You have 4 names right there. So Sammy Watkins could, at the end of the day, find himself as a number 5 receiver. But, I will say that like a guy like Zach Pascal has played a little bit of special teams in the past. So maybe he's more of your special teams guy. I don't know. I see both sides of it. Like I see the talent and I'm just very intrigued. I kind of would love to do what they did with, bringing back Marlon Mack, just adding as much firepower as you can, because we know, Derek, injuries happen. I mean, how many times in the last couple of years have guys like Marcus Johnson and others had to be brought up because of the injuries to receiver? Paris Campbell's a name we've talked about a lot, right? We think he's very talented, but he's been injured the last couple of years. So he's not a slam dunk, sure thing that he's going to play all 16 games. T.Y. Hilton has definitely struggled with his share of injuries, albeit last year he was pretty healthy. But overall, these last couple of years with his age, he's struggled with some injuries. So I get both sides of it. And Sammy Watkins, I mean, odds are he's probably not going to play in all 16 games either. So I'm kind of just continue to add talent. But I think you're right. Like, what would his role be? That is going to be a big question mark. And I think that's something that when they do meet on Wednesday, they're going to have to kind of figure out. And that'll probably be a question that Sammy Watkins brings up. Like, what is going to be my role on this offense? But overall, I like this. I like the Colts just continuing to kick the tires at wide receiver because, I feel like, and I've always kind of felt this the entire offseason, I feel like even if the Colts did bring back T.Y. Hilton, they probably should still address receivers someplace. Maybe that is in free agency with a guy like Sammy Watkins, who's kind of like a mid-tier kind of free agent. Maybe that's in like the 4th round or something like that. But I do feel like the Colts need to continue to search for wide receivers and continue to add because, like I mentioned, the injuries happen. And it seems like the Colts have been one of the most injury-prone teams at wide receiver the last couple of years. So I'm all for continuing to add talent at this group. Can you just imagine, though, just that wide receiver room, the immense talent that would be there if you signed Sammy Watkins to pair alongside with these other receivers that we kind of know a little bit more about? I mean, that surely, from a fan standpoint, has to get you a little bit like foaming at the mouth, excited, man. Like that's kind of where I'm at least with Sammy Watkins.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can speak for that on all of Colts Nation. You might be a little more excited than a lot of these other guys would be, but but also then you have to think along the lines of, what about some of these other wide receivers that have been in the mix, right? DeMichael Harris, that's been a name that's been continuously brought up. And then, you're talking about guys like Desmond Patman who didn't get to play any last year, that are still waiting for their opportunity. It's ultimately a matter of would it take away from just guys that we already have? And then on top of that, and I think this would be the final point, because honestly, there's not a whole lot more to really discuss because we've kind of mentioned it, when it comes to injuries and things like that. On top of that, Sammy Watkins has had his fair share of injuries as well. So, is it worth bringing a guy in here to, try to fill the injury prone group with another injury prone wide receiver, right? I mean, ultimately, are they going to even be able to convince him to come? Because, like you said, if they re-sign T.Y. Hilton, then ultimately Watkins' role almost becomes virtually non-existent. I mean, there's very few opportunities for him unless somebody gets injured down the road. And I don't know if he's going to bank his future on somebody else on the team getting hurt.
That's a fair point. And also to add on to that, I don't know if like the Colts are wanting to get into a bidding war for Sammy Watkins. I mean, honestly, you mentioned all the other teams that are interested in him. I think he could have potentially be a guy that a team takes a chance on and pays a good amount of money to, whereas Ballard, compared to what Ballard would give, where Ballard's kind of like, nah, we're good. I certainly am intrigued by the talent, like I said, but I think those are two really fair points. Like, what would his role be? And then also, like with the Colts, what's the Colts breaking point in terms of price? I think that's something that they're going to have to weigh. But you know what? Like, the fact that the Colts are doing this, I think just speaks volumes to how they feel like they need to continue to add and upgrade to wide receiver, regardless if it is Sammy Watkins or not. I am intrigued by that because I think we kind of feel the same way. Like, we like some of these guys they have, but they just still don't have a true number one guy, at least at this current point. Not to say that guys like Michael Pittman or whoever cannot be that guy, but right now, as it stands, we can't say, definitively who the number one wide receiver is going into this season. So I like that the Colts are continuing to tinker, continuing to try to get Carson Wentz weapons. I'm all for it, man. If you want to add more talent like this, a former, first round pick, I am totally good with that. But those are some concerns that we have. And I definitely agree. I think they're very valid. So yeah, I think that kind of is our thoughts on Sammy Watkins visiting Indianapolis. It's very intriguing. I certainly wouldn't mind if they brought him here, knowing that, we don't know what his role is going to be. Probably not going to come and be the number one wide receiver, but still, it's very intriguing. It's a very interesting name, that's for sure. But I'm curious, what do you guys think? People who are listening, do you guys want that? Would you like the idea of bringing Sammy Watkins to Indianapolis? Let us know in the comments below. For Derek and myself, thanks, guys, so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.